To scale your e-commerce brand, you need to be able to predict the future, but that doesn't mean you have to be clairvoyant. You just need to be able to incorporate the discipline of financial forecasting into your growth plans. Sure, you can do what a lot of other brands do and just close your eyes and fly blindly into the storm, but there are just so many pitfalls that you can run into if you don't have some sort of visibility about what might happen. For example, if you don't have a forecast, it can be very difficult to know that several months down the road what sort of revenue you're going to have, what your profits will look like, or how much cash you're going to have available. And that can further lead to a whole bunch of other challenges. Like say you want to plan a big hire, you want to hire a COO to help manage your brand as you keep on scaling. If you don't know how much money you're going to be making or how much cash you're going to have available, it can be very difficult to plan for a very substantial salary like that. It's not great if you hire someone with a 5-figure a month salary and then a few months later realize you don't have the money to pay them. It also makes it a lot harder to plan inventory purchases, so oftentimes you might end up with having not enough inventory or you might have too much inventory. It can also make it difficult to pursue strategies that require significant investments. Like if you want to launch a brand new product line, there's a lot that goes into R&D, planning, manufacturing before you collect any sort of revenue. So you need to make sure that you have enough profit and cash flow from your existing product lines to be able to fund that. Another example is expanding into wholesale or retail. Those are very substantial relationships that can take a lot of time to build and oftentimes means you have to send a very significant first order. And if you ever want to raise funds to scale more aggressively, whether it be through debt or equity, you need to be able to present figures that forecast the future, not only to convince people to give you money, but also to help you decide how much you should actually be raising. And at the end of the day, I don't know of a single brand that's been able to hit 9 figures without some sort of forward-looking planning. So all that to say, an effective financial forecasting process is essential for an e-commerce brand to be able to scale with confidence. But most founders aren't finance people, so they find the entire concept rather daunting and don't know where to begin. Now, while forecasts can get extremely complex, the concepts behind them are fairly straightforward. Any brand can get started with a simple forecast if you know the right steps. So here I'll give you a straightforward to-do list to be able to get started with a forecast that's effective and reliable. Now, the first thing you want to do before you even get started is get your books up to date. You want to make sure that all of your financial data is entered and categorized accurately in your accounting software. While it is technically possible to build out a forecast for a company that has no historical data, if you do have that historical data, it's a lot easier to build a forecast that's grounded in reality. Now, once your bookkeeping is all up to date, you want to analyze historical performance. This step is crucial because not only does it help you identify trends and seasonal variations, but it can help you identify the relationships between various financial line items that are going to be crucial to actually build a forecast. The more detail that you have in your financial data, the more interesting the patterns you can observe. For example, it's probably obvious enough that if ad spend goes up, then revenue goes up, but it can be helpful to identify additional things like how much can ad spend go up while maintaining a consistent ROAS? What is the relationship between your ad spend and your new customer revenue? How is returning customer revenue affected by new customer revenue, and how long does it take for that effect to take place? Maybe a huge spike in new customer revenue is only going to give you a spike in returning customer revenue 3 months down the line. How do your additional marketing expenses like agency fees or influencer gifting or content creation correlate with those increases in ad spend? When do you typically pay out annual bonuses, and what sort of a cash flow hit does that create? All of these insights are valuable because understanding where you've been helps you predict where you're going. Now you can begin the actual forecasting process, which consists broadly of 2 steps. The first one is to extrapolate out that historical data. Your historical data should be a baseline for your future projections, but you want to build it in such a way that the patterns you're aware of from looking at your historical data remain consistent. That means using formulas to build relationships between the various line items. So if revenue goes up by 50%, then probably shipping expense is also going to go up by 50%. Ad spend, on the other hand, might go up 70% because your ROAS might go down. If you build these relationships in mechanically using formulas in a spreadsheet, then it also allows you to tweak different assumptions to change the projections based on new information. So you can see what happens if instead of getting a 2.4 ROAS, you're actually getting a 2.2. The second major step is to factor in your strategic plans for growth. These are going to be forward-looking plans that you have that wouldn't necessarily be captured in the historical data. For example, are you launching a new product? Are you entering new markets? Or are you just going to make some substantial new investments into marketing? These plans should be reflected in your financial forecast. For example, if you're planning on expanding into wholesale and that's going to add an extra $500,000 of revenue each month, do you need to also hire a sales director? Probably, yeah. So make sure you have those dependencies baked in. Now, once we've built out our forecast, we're not actually done. It's not actually that difficult to just make up numbers and say that we're going to get from 1 million to 50 million in 1 year. The real value comes from the habit of analyzing the forecast on a recurring basis. So that means that ideally every month you should be doing 2 things. The first is a forecast versus actuals analysis. What you do is that you update a particular month in the forecast with the actual numbers you experienced. And then you compare the actuals to that forecast and dig into why you might have missed the mark. So if you forecasted that you'd hit 400K in revenue, but you only hit 300K, why did that happen? Is it because ROAS was bad? Did you not spend enough on ads? Did you have bad returning customer revenue? understanding is very valuable. And the second thing you need to do is update future periods based on your learnings from that forecast versus actual analysis. So if you realize that, hey, I thought a 2.4 ROAS was reasonable, but realistically, we're not going to get much better than a 2.1 or a 2.2, so then update those future periods. If you follow this process diligently, every month your gap between the actuals and the forecast should get smaller and smaller, which in turn means that your forecast becomes more reliable over time. Now, like I said, I know that this can seem daunting and it sounds like a lot of work, but let's take a moment and build a forecast together. It's going to be extremely simple, but we can do it in just a few minutes just to show you the concepts that go into it. All right, so we'll start with something super basic. Let's just say that we have a forecast for 2025, and we're going to expand this, and we're going to expand this now to about 12 months. Oh, need a few more. And let's make that formatting a little bit nicer. All right, great. And center. All right, so in the interest of keeping this super simple, we're going to keep it a basic concept. So we're going to start off with a line for revenue. We'll give this a starting amount of, let's say, 100,000, and format that a bit nicer. And let's just say that increases by about 2% every month. So we'll turn that into a formula. We'll just take this and multiply it by 1 plus that. I didn't put it, I'm missing a 0 there. All right, so we'll take that and we'll drag that formula all the way to the end. So I look at that and think, okay, that's not enough growth. Let's make it 8%. That feels a bit more ambitious. Now we'll bake in a line for discounts, and we're going to assume that discounts are always at 10%. So this is an average. So we're going to take this number, multiply by this one, and so now we're going to have that. Format that nicely, and I'm going to add a little line and just sum that up. So that is now my net revenue. Next, I'll put in a line for cost of goods sold. We're going to assume that our inventory is, let's just call it 30% of our revenue. Then we're going to take our gross revenue and multiply by the 30%. Once again, fix the formatting and drag that all the way down. So now our gross profit is going to be our net revenue minus our COGS. Now we'll add in an assumption for ad spend. So let's assume that our ROAS is starting at around a 2. And we're going to assume that that's going to go down at around a rate of 2%. So let's go 2%. So now we'll take this and multiply that by 1 minus this. And we're going to drag that out to over here and also format that. So based on this, we know that our ad spend is going to be basically our revenue divided by our ROAS. So that means that our ad spend is going to look like that. We're also adding an assumption for shipping, and that's going to be, let's call it 6%. So our gross revenue times the 6% is going to be our shipping expense, and we'll drag that out. Now we can look at our contribution margin, which is going to be basically your gross profit minus the sum of these two variable expenses. So we can drag that out now. So now we can see that we have a problem because the moment our ROAS goes below 1.85, our contribution margin goes negative. So based on this, we might have to either change our assumption of how much our ROAS is going to degrade or reduce our expectations around how much our revenue can scale. For now, let's just drop this to a 1% and then start this maybe at a 2.2 instead. So that keeps us afloat a little bit longer. And lastly, I'll add a few basic fixed expenses. So let's just have rent, and that's going to be, let's call it, I don't know, $7,000 a month. So we'll just pick that 7,000, go all the way to the end. And we'll also add personnel at, let's call it 20,000 a month. So we'll drag that all the way across. So our net profit is going to be our contribution margin minus our fixed expenses. And so we can drag that all the way and format that. So based on this, we can see that we're not making a lot of money. So that will help us determine how much money do we have to raise from funding, how much do we need in debt, and then when do we need to become profitable to be able to pay off that debt if we raise any. It may also mean we have to be a little less aggressive about scaling, or we have to have a healthier ROAS to do so. Or maybe we'll decide to go fully remote so we can avoid the rent expense. Point is, visibility like this can help you make much smarter decisions about your business. Now, like I said, that was an extremely basic example that just took a few minutes to put together. A sophisticated forecast can have 20 tabs and multiple different scenarios to be modeled. If you need something that complex, you might need to work with someone like us. But hopefully with the information you have, you're now able to at least get started on your own. Remember, forecasting is not a one-time task. It's a continuous process. Using the latest data to stay on top of your forecast helps keep your business agile. It'll help you make informed decisions, allocate resources effectively, and plan for sustainable growth. So start using these steps to build a financial forecasting routine and watch your business thrive. But for now, I hope that was helpful. See you in the next video.